And joining me now is Pam Palmater, Indigenous Governance Chair at Toronto Metropolitan University. Thanks for being with us today, Pam.
Thanks for covering this, Carolyn.
Well, can we check in for a moment and pull back and take a second to acknowledge that today is a significant one, and we need to check in to see how we're doing on the TRC's 94 calls to action. How would you say Canada is doing?
Well, Canada, in terms of federal government, all the provincial governments, and then Canadians. I think Canadians far outshine any level of government in this. In the 10 years since the TRC came out, Canadians have literally grabbed onto those calls to action and have incorporated them in their communities, churches, schools, like you name it. They are doing letter writing, fundraising. They're out in droves today celebrating the culture with Indigenous peoples and really working on the relationship. In terms of federal and provincial governments, they still have quite a ways to go. So the federal government has done things. They had the National Inquiry into Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls. They enacted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, legislation to protect Indigenous languages, things like that, things that came right out of the TRC report. However, they're really slow on the substantive issues in terms of addressing lands and resources, protecting Aboriginal and treaty rights, making sure that the framework of the relationship between Canada and First Nations is literally based on UNDRIP, that Declaration on Indigenous Peoples' Rights.
Do you think both the federal and the provincial governments have placed enough urgency on what some consider the residential schools of today, which is the child welfare system, and ensuring that the Indigenous children of today are surrounded by the culture and the language of their generations?
See, Carolyn, that is the question, because I wouldn't want Canadians to think about this as a historic issue. Yes, Indian residential schools don't exist anymore, but our kids are in foster care at rates 3 times those of Indian residential schools. And that doesn't even include those who are living homeless on the street, those who are forcibly human trafficked, those that are murdered or go missing. So we still have a huge way to go, keeping in mind, too, that many of the victims of Indian residential schools end up in corrections, and we are grossly overrepresented in prisons. A lot of these things are under the jurisdiction of the provinces, and so I would argue that the provinces are far behind the federal government when it comes to trying to deal with these things. And so they really need to pick up their game, because we are harming generation after generation. It might not be residential schools, but it's foster care. If it's not foster care, it's prisons. So we have to stop doing this to Indigenous peoples so that we can all work together to move forward.
I think everyone would agree that these are terrible things that happened previously and in some cases are still happening today. Are they solvable is the question.
Oh, entirely. Think about in the past, stealing kids and putting them into residential schools. Now, stealing kids and forcing them into foster care. And for what reason? We know statistically the majority of those kids are taken away for issues of poverty. Not enough food, not enough space in a house. These things can be remedied very easily. Similarly, in the past, we had the forced and coerced sterilizations of Indigenous women and girls. That's still happening. Federal and provincial governments can put laws and mechanisms in place to stop that practice. Similarly, with the over-incarceration, we have given no end of legislative and policy suggestions to stop this, to actually work on the prevention part, because again, for men, it's conditions of poverty for the most part, and for women, it's being victims of violence. So we need to work on these before they become issues.
All right, thank you, Pam, for your time today. Pam Palmater, Indigenous Governance Chair at Toronto Metropolitan University.